Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Abbott with the Market Insights and Thought Leadership Organization at Thomson Reuters. Joining me today is Paul Fischer, my colleague and friend. Paul is the president of the legal professionals business at Thomson Reuters. Paul, thank you very much for getting together and joining us today. We launched the Peer Monitor Index for the second quarter 3 or 4 weeks ago at this point. And really, we're seeing in that report some pretty amazing results for law firm performance. One thing to keep in mind is it's a year-over-year comparison, and the results that we're seeing in Q2 21 compared to a pretty abysmal Q2 of 20. But even so, the performance is really, really very strong. So we're coming out the other side of 18 months of just total chaos, Paul. I'm kind of wondering, as we look at the market, as you look at the market now, what are you seeing out there for law firms?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Mike. It's great to be here to have the discussion today. And it certainly has been a challenging year and a half for everyone, including law firms. And they've had to, and in many instances still are, navigate changes never seen before. We went through the Great Recession a decade ago, but everybody didn't go home and go home overnight and start working from home. So the challenges our customers have faced in terms of returning to office, first going home, returning to office, and managing client relationships remotely have been quite unique. By no means are we out of the woods yet. When we talk with customers, it's still a daily challenge, and there's a significant amount of uncertainty in the market today, but there's also a sense of optimism and relief. And when we look at the numbers in the second quarter, you can see that bearing out. And certainly one positive that we've seen is from an industry perspective, we're seeing a lot of innovation and resilience. A year and a half ago, nobody knew what to expect. Now the PMI hit a record in the second quarter. Demand has recovered. Demand is back to where it was in 2019 and then some. Firms are keeping their expenses low. And what they've really done is they put themselves in a strong position with optionality to navigate the road ahead.
Yeah, I think it's right. When you mentioned comparing to 2019 performance, I think it's if you take 20 out of the equation, as I mentioned, a pretty abysmal quarter and year, that growth is still really strong, especially in the demand side of things. We're coming off of a period of, 6 to 7 plus years of pretty flat demand growth, and to see that uptick is pretty encouraging. I think we're seeing a lot of firms manage their top line and bottom lines pretty effectively. And the firms that seem to be firing on all cylinders are doing a pretty decent job of cutting expenses where there's opportunity, where they need to, but also investing in growth. And you mentioned it. I mean, you and I have had the opportunity to spend some time with law firm leaders here over the past month or so. And it's a combination of optimism, relief. I think there's still a little bit of uncertainty yet, right? But when you think about that the optimism out there, what do you think is driving that?
Well, the strong PMI number is a reflection that firms have largely adapted to the environment, and they've been able to work with staff and clients to continue to serve as needed. And in many instances, they're exceeding expectations. So the first 3 months were really tough. They were tough for all of us. They were tough across the world, but law firm demand came back in Q3 of last year, and they've continued down a path of working alongside their customers to drive growth. And in many regards, the challenge has shifted to hiring. It all started, though, with the sudden shift to work from home that we all went through, and it went a lot smoother than I think any of us expected. And law firms should be given a lot of credit for making that transition. On a larger scale, the pandemic is with us, but businesses have learned how to continue operating and continue to do well in the environment. And law firms are leading the way, working right alongside them. And we saw that play out in the rates category that we track with Peer Monitor, in that as businesses were making important decisions, they wanted the very best counsel to be right beside them. So in many regards, they went up in the firm to say, we're betting we're betting the company with this decision, or it's really, really important in some regard, and we're going to pay for the advice to help make sure that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it says a lot about the state of law firm and client relations. You compare that to coming out of the credit crisis, and there was a lot of noise around how law firms weren't willing or able to kind of flex with the situation. That does not seem to be the case at all as we sit here today. What do you think firms are doing right now that's different, or how are they handling this in terms of maintaining their operations, but also their focus on the clients as well?
Well, I would say, first of all, they pivoted immediately. So everybody went home and they were able to adapt very quickly in the new environment. They did not miss a beat. And so it is a testament, first and foremost, to firm leadership that they were able to make that change and that adaptation. And it starts with their technology infrastructure, and it's been building for several years. Many of us, including our law firms, were using some form of video conferencing tools and the like. But there's also been a new wave of technologies and resources that they've adapted to. So we've seen a significant increase in the use of solutions, document automation, AI-powered research, et cetera. We see that playing out with our own products. And we saw that with things like Westlaw and Practical Law and HiQ. Many of these tools, whether it be research, analysis, HiQ collaboration, were necessary and seen as must-have before the pandemic, but they became even more so when we weren't working and no longer working in an office environment. So we've seen that investment. And more broadly, the industry had already been making huge improvements in efficiency, but these last 18 months have forced an acceleration of these trends and sped up adoption of advanced technologies.
Right. We certainly see that play out in the peer monitor data. The firms, we kind of talked about this a minute ago, but the ones that have been outperforming over the past year or so, right, are the ones that continue to make these investments, as you mentioned. It's investments in their talent, for one thing, and not that that's new, but there's a renewed focus on that, but also in technology, and I would say specifically workflow technology, and really that technology investment could be a differentiator as it relates to the competitive environment, right? So a lot to be optimistic about, but we also know there's still some uncertainty that remains. And what do you think some of the challenges that are looming potentially could be?
Well, clearly, there's still plenty of uncertainty, and the course of the pandemic is still unknown as it plays out. And we can see how the global economy is being impacted. And one of the areas is supply chain disruptions. We see that certainly play out in global trade and broader view of the businesses that we operate. But we even see it on a personal level, where there's things that we take for granted that were disrupted on the supply chain side and that haven't come back. So there's still certainly uncertainty around that. Law firms have been actively working on the return to office and what that looks like, as well as a heightened focus on mental health as the pandemic takes a cumulative toll over several months. So that's certainly an area of focus. But as we've been discussing here today, by adapting as well as firms have, they now have greater flexibility, and they have some of that optionality operationally, financially, technologically to deal with what lies ahead. For years, Mike, firms have been striving to develop new models for the delivery of legal services, one that's more collaborative with clients, technology-driven, flexible, and now we're seeing firms move even faster. So based on the conversations with our customers, some of which you and I have had together, we feel good about where the industry's at, how they've adapted, even as we continue to face various challenges and uncertainty.
Absolutely. I think as chaotic and awful as this has been, I think we come out the other side of this, hopefully soon, but in a much better place. And I think the story for law firms is incredibly encouraging and incredibly positive. It's going to be a really interesting to watch the sprint to the finish line here at the end of 21. So, Paul, thank you. Your insights are always incredibly valuable and great to catch up with you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Have a good day.